Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Barbarian. This is of course CK3's Dev Diary number 50 here today with poetry to my ears. Now before we start, I just want to say, of course, on the last Dev Diary I gave it a sideways thumb, and I stand by that opinion. I was kind of wonky on it, I wasn't sure, because the mechanic of course that was showcased, which was winter, is great. I got nothing against it. I think anything that makes the world more immersive, more interesting, is something that I want in my game. And I think the winter mechanic, as they expanded upon it from CK2, is good. I wish there was greater modding support, but that aside, for the base game, and I know most of you of course play the base game in particular, I think we're looking at a great addition to the game. But what was really missing, what was absent for me, miraculously, was something like a roadmap. I complained about it and I said to myself, hey, a roadmap would be so nice. We went, I think, 2 or 3 months without any dev diaries. I think it was just 2 months, right? But we went without any dev diaries, without any news, and I was starved. I mean, I want to know where CK3 goes. Until launch came, of course, we knew pretty much that the dev team was aligned to what the majority of the fan base wanted. They certainly were aligned to what I wanted. I think CK3 came out in particular very, very well, but with how long these update cycles are, with the fact that there's a season pass, I want to know what is going on. And I will say, there's 2 things in this dev diary. The mechanic itself, I mean, yeah, poetry is great, don't get me wrong, we're going to get into that in a second, but I will say that there are 2 additional things that, you know, one is implicit and one is explicit in this very dev diary. There are 2 things that most certainly make this a standout dev diary for me, because it gives away where the devs of CK3 are taking this game, what they have in mind for it, and it should give you just a general understanding whether you are aligned to them as much as I am when it comes to this. So let's dive in and let's dissect why I feel this way. Poetry to my ears. This ain't just your CK2 poetry, though this is all the new poetry. Reworked stats, a character interaction, and for which I'm so very, very sorry, randomized poetry generation. Let's take a look at this. Evening reflections. I sip in my mug of expensive champagne. It was pointed out, by the way, to the devs that champagne didn't exist until the 17th century. I believe, at least I didn't know that either. Before that, it was all just, you know, bubble wine or whatever. Scanning over my latest scrolled work. Failing strenuously this spring. Sometimes fate is far too cruel. Leaving a noble and peasant under such rule. Or what cruel fate's destiny doles out when such a tosspot wields such clout. Truly, I am one of the great artistic minds of my age. Of course, this is an outstanding and amazing poem that I assume he wrote, you know, maybe for his liege, maybe for another vassal, maybe for the Pope himself, I'm not sure, but you can see here he can pick up the poetry. He could also just become a journaler, or he could simply get rid of some stress. I don't know why you would take this, unless you're a hardcore role player, in which, you know, I salute you. That's a great choice, but these traits seem good. Journaler is an outstanding trait, and poetry, of course, with additional interactions should be great as well. Writing a poem. Now let's take a look at this. Every poem has a theme at present, and at present we have 5 themes to choose from. Romance, in which the poet expresses affection and desire. Legacy, in which the poet muses on the nature of death and power and the subject's impact on the world. Mourning, in which the poet discusses the death and lingering emotions left behind after the subject or a relative of theirs passes away. Strife, where the poet expounds on the necessity of seizing power, life, and opportunity when it appears, and on glories yet to be won. Or incompetence, wherein the poet slams the subject for their weakness, incompetence, and method of eating asparagus. I can tell you already that somebody being slammed for the method of eating asparagus will be, there will be a lot of mileage in this for Reddit titles on Crusader Kings, on r/Crusader Kings, because slam is just one of the few great clickbait words, I think. These themes are very interesting. I think they're very cool. It depends on the variety of what you can do, whether you write it, you know, inwards, you just write it as a bit of a journal, a poetry journal, whether you constantly send it out, whether I can send the Pope a very insulting poem, you know, that sort of stuff. I think it adds a lot of roleplay, because you can decide what your character's interested in. You can go with whatever you think is appropriate, something that was pretty much absent in CK2. I mean, CK2 is a great game, don't get me wrong here, but when it comes to how these sort of traits, these sort of lifestyles were utilized, I believe that it was underutilized, so this is an addition that I most certainly welcome. Here we got the trait. Who enjoys spending his evenings giving rhyme and verse to his thoughts, feelings, and experiences, gives +1 diplomacy per level of fame. That is quite the good bonus, I'll tell you that much. And then stress loss +10%, also quite decent. This is a good trait all around. I don't think that has to be said, in particular, of course, with the interactions that come on top. Once we know the theme and subject, if any, so we can do it without a subject, so without a person that it is targeted at, we can feed that into custom localization functions that randomize a couplet. At present, we have both intro and outro functions for each theme, as well as a title generation, allowing us to generate ditties between 2 and 4 lines. I don't know how you pronounce, you know, Ditto, you know, nice Pokemon. And 4 lines in length plus title, though I hope to expand on these in the future. And now here you can see some examples. Let's have some examples. Here's a love poem to the woman that Lord Elised ab Tewdre never quite met. I will of course not read all of these out. Ruminates on the problems of succession, or where the Lord laments the success of Prince Rodri ab Merfyn in northern Wales. The spawn crowned. Some men simply make all others queasy. Their features awkward, their breathing wheezy. Oh, what cruel fates destiny doles out, and all must behold such a terrible lout. Could have been written about me right there. Use! Firstly, we have the triumphant return of the V completely original Tortures Poetry Interaction variant. Of course, you can torture people with your horrible, horrible poetry. I wish, though, that this little thing right here was changed. Characters who are poets and elect to torture their prisoners will frequently spend hours declaiming their very worst poetry to them. I think there should be an interaction where if I'm a horrible poet, if my charisma is incredibly low, I can go in and read something out that I believe to be a great poem, but that actually isn't, and then it still amounts to torture. I think that would be nice. I would love that. But yeah, this is a generally nice interaction, of course. More than this, though, poets can also send poems to most characters within diplomatic range. In all instances, sending a poem costs a little prestige, but the effects available depend on the theme selected, and the themes available depend on who you're writing to. A romantic poem makes a subject like you. A poem about their legacy makes them like you and gives them a little piety. A poem about strife makes them like you and gives them a little prestige. And a poem about mourning makes them like you and give them a little stress loss. Unless, of course, they dislike the poem and publicly mock you for it. So this is something where you can strengthen a different character and strengthen your bond with them. And I want to point out right here what I think is implicit in this dev diary. It is not something explicit, it just is a theme of the entire thing. My German teacher would be very thankful for me still utilizing themes in writing, although of course this doesn't really... Listen, forget about it, okay? What I think this entire dev diary is simply an ode to role-playing. Of course it was obvious, but I think if you melt this together with the last dev diary, with everything related to winter, with everything related to how your character reacts to it, to how your troops react to it, how you see the world, and how the world changes without even your impact doing anything, so, you know, being a bit more flexible on how you can approach things, because things will be different tomorrow, even if you choose to do nothing, I think we can simply reveal that the team fully comprehends, that the developers fully understand that what CK3 right now, beyond, of course, you know, mechanics, I mean, we all have preferences, but what it needs fundamentally, and what everybody can agree with, is simply more roleplay opportunity. If we get that in this game, if we get more opportunities to say, I want to LARP, I want to sit down and have a character that writes poems because he likes it, or because she likes it, you know, because it is about a topic that they appreciate, or it is because, you know, of somebody that they want to put down, that they dislike, that could lead to a war, or maybe this is the ramp up to the war. You send a poem, they dislike it, and then you declare because this was a grave insult to your honor and you are now rivals. All that sort of stuff has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with optimal play, and I'm a huge fan of the CK3 team taking this approach. It certainly is what I was hoping for, that they would essentially say, you know, min-maxing is one thing and you can most certainly do it, but what this game is supposed to be is a story generator. It is pure roleplay, and I think this is exactly what this is. So this is the implicit sort of, you know, wayline, or rather timetable that we have here, you know, where we can say 13th of March, that is when Paradox Insider happens, that is when we see what the next DLC is, at least hopefully they tease it, they have to, right? But then we also already know before any of that happens that this is clearly a roleplay driven DLC and update coming for us, because they've been working on this sort of thing. And I want to stress again, by the way, poetry of course is entirely free. This is included in the free patch in coming with 1.3. Some poems are quite flattering to receive and may well be accepted without question. The latest work of my husband, Petty King Dumnath, has become all the rage at court of late. The piece deals with feelings of love and romance, and Dumnath has publicly dedicated it to me. She does not look very happy about it, I'll tell you that much. My passionate love. Oh, how such a beautiful countenance gleams, shimmering, sparkling, haunting my dreams. For her life is my life, and our life to be as warm and refreshing as a fragrant hot tea. So far I've kept my thoughts to myself, but the buzz has grown too dramatic to ignore it much longer. You can say, yeah, you know, I don't know quite how I feel about this, or Dumnath, I can see this is truly heartfelt, or pff, drivel. Now, I really love this. This is, of course, from the, I believe the Chancellor has this pamphlet in his hands already, but he looks just so eager to show it to his wife, and his wife's like, Another poem? Are you kidding me? I like the idea of this. Again, I want to stress that it is very much about roleplay. Now, I'm not going to read this out. You can read that yourself. He definitely hates this fella here, and you can see you lose 50 opinion of Petty King Dumnath II, and you gain stress. So right now, he's just actually stressing this poor little fella out. And yes, these are also usable in MP. Big fan of that. I still hope, fingers crossed, for like a chat at some point. I know Amiga Day already has implemented it. That is Long Game Short. You might know him. And Long Game Short has gone and implemented a wonderful, wonderful chat feature. You should check it out. It is in the workshop. But you can see you can send these sort of things to your friends or enemies, depending on who you play on multiplayer games with. I don't know, never played with an enemy, but could be fun. A lord is naught without wisdom, a mocking parody, a waiting schism. Life itself shrivels in his wake, and all the world feels pain and ache. Yeah, that's something that definitely the arse crowned. I want to send that to a friend for sure. Now, with that being said, let me know what you think about poetry, but now we move into something that is an explicit roadmap. Now, you know, at least to a degree, it shows what they think needed urgent addressing and what we can be looking forward to, at least in part, because they published some of the patch notes coming with 1.3. Men-at-Arms, special troops and mercenaries now have travel time and, like levies, have a penalty to disband, re-raise during wars. Travel time is based on the distance to the realm capital. Before that, they spawned immediately. No longer happens. Good change. I don't know why it was the other way around, but whatever. This should effectively stop being able to teleport men-at-arms across the map. The renowned cost of acquiring dynasty legacies has been overhauled. Instead of a linear progression 1, 2, and 3k, the cost is now dynamic. It should be much easier to unlock your first few legacy perks, but significantly harder to unlock all legacies in the game. All dynasty legacy perks have been rebalanced. Their effects should now be much more tangible and interesting. Big change. I remember before CK3 even came out, there was a dev diary about legacies, and I said this is a cool idea. I really like this theme and the concept of it, but what we have seen so far of the effect that they have and what they cost, you know, it is very, very steep if you want to go down just one path, and the AI most of the time does that, meaning that they get stuck until the mid and late game with about like 2-3 legacies, because it is very difficult to actually get the 4,000 and 5,000 points for the last 2 of a tree. This change is what I wanted. Somebody must have read my mind, although I think that many of you probably were complaining about this, rightfully so, of course. This is now changing. We will see how effective these changes actually are, but the fact that it's dynamic, I imagine maybe it's like the first one is 500, then wherever you pay, right? So like no matter what legacy you dip into, you pay 500, maybe afterwards like 750, then 1k, and maybe then we go up to 1.5k, maybe then we go up to 2.5k, so that it actually becomes a bit of an exponential situation right there. But if everybody can sort of, you know, just stock up on a set of very basic dynasty legacies, I think that makes especially the early game much more interesting. Let's skip this one. Married characters will no longer wander off if they are in a realm where they are subservient to the other part of the marriage and their spouse is in the same court. Very good. You can now disinherit people outside your diplomatic range. I've encountered that myself, being not able to disinherit somebody, very annoying. Now it is gone. Feudalizing as a tribe no longer requires all tribal era innovations. Now you only need 70% of all civic and military innovations. That's a great change, but I think there's a bit of a footnote there that I would like to add. I think this is a great change because before that it was overkill. It was so difficult to change anything. There was a lot of effort that had to go into it. But I do also think that maybe you should even further slow down people living in the steppes. If you move out of the steppes, obviously you get territory that has much more development. Development fundamentally impacts how you deal with research, but the steppes becoming feudal or clan, depending of course on, you know, what they do, very early on I think is sort of depressing. I think it's the wrong message to send. I think you want the Mongols to come in, you know, and still fight, of course, the usual tribes over there, the usual nomads over there. I hope that they adjusted for that, but either way, I mean, you know, who plays there right now. If you do, my apologies. You will no longer get stressed from parents or siblings dying of old age when they're 65 or older. If they are friends or lovers, you might still get stressed, though. I remember they were like death chains. Somebody would die of old age, somebody else would get sad, also die, and then somebody else would get both of those things as a negative stress hit and also die, and it would just keep going and going and going, especially in larger families. That will no longer be the case. Hovering over the unit plate of a friendly unit now shows its full path. Great for seeing where your allies are going. Absolutely excellent. Players now receive a warning when their enemy in a war forms a new alliance. Also, absolutely excellent. And then down here in game content, you can see I literally marked everything. All formerly inaccessible religious clothes and headgear are now accessible in the barbershop. You want to wear the Pope's hat and step pagan robes? Go right ahead. Great stuff. Added a small interaction to pardon a subject's crimes in exchange for opinion. Absolutely great. A Guardian might now get a hook on their ward should they be of a greedy or deceitful persuasion. Both of those are great for roleplay. I think they're very, very interesting in your character already starting or being in a position where they can interact with others. Even if you're 16 years old, your Guardian might already have a hook on you, and on the other hand, you might be able to forgive somebody else's crime. I think those work very well hand in hand. You can now offer concubines at concerts to other characters. Great stuff. When offering vassalization to a feudal ruler, you may now offer a more lenient contract to improve their chance of accepting. Anything related to a peaceful expansion is something that I absolutely welcome, in particular if it makes it so that the land is somewhat useless, you know, at the start of your contract there, but in several generations you can change the contract significantly enough that you can then simply say, you know what, you're now in a position of having a very normal contract. Added a narrative event for converting to a new faith, as well as a notification for when your liege converts to a new faith. The narrative event, I think that is great stuff, because before that you just click the button, then you've changed, but now you actually have a situation where you get some flavor with that as well. So what I'm saying is, what we can see in these changes is that they've clearly listened to the situation of teleporting, to the situation of the legacy stuff. They've clearly taken an approach of saying, we want you to experience this game as a roleplay simulator and not as an exploit simulator. And so they've moved ahead and actually made it so that, you know, you have a reasonable sort of degree of interaction with the world, with your legacies, with your troops, and so on and so forth. And then in the dev diary itself, poetry, very cool, don't get me wrong, but the red string going through this dev diary and the last dev diary definitely makes me give it a thumbs up, primarily because, well, we're looking at the red string of roleplay, and I would always follow that one even if it was straight into Tartarus. Now, that being said, this is the end of this video. Let me know what you expect, maybe what the theme of the upcoming DLC is. I would be very interested in hearing your opinion of it. Honestly, I'm not sure. Poetry sounds very chivalrous, right? It sounds like very like a mid-game, late-game expansion sort of thing, but I don't think that's it. I don't think that would be a smart choice either. You know, oh, here's content, but you can only have it if you play until 1200. But I'm just saying I'm actually completely in the dark. I wish I knew what it was. Let me know what it is, and, you know, maybe you get it right. The price is honor. Yeah. All right. With that being said, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Now, for the moment, I would like to thank the members of the channel that are making videos such as this one possible. Thank you very much, dear and absolutely gorgeous and intelligent barons, counts, and dukes. I really do appreciate it. And for the moment, later, alligator.